What evidence led you to believe a conspiracy theory is true? Story 1. I am convinced the Fresno Police Department were responsible for what happened to John Lang. From what I remember, Lang was a journalist who openly criticized the department. One of his pieces focused on police targeting poor neighborhoods, pulling over vehicles that weren't even illegally parked. After that, he began posting about being watched, cars outside his house, people surveilling him in what he described as FBI-style behavior. One night, he posted on Facebook asking if anyone could let him stay with them, saying he believed police were going to kill him that night. No one helped. That same night, his house burned down. Initially, the coroner stated Lang had been stabbed to death, but later walked that statement back. That reversal is what convinces me something was seriously wrong with the official story. Story 2. I used to live in a tiny town in South Dakota, and I swear something is wrong with that place. I've half-jokingly convinced myself it's the Dairy Queen. For a town of about 7,000 people, it is always packed. Even stranger, for 11 straight years, that location sold more blizzards on Miracle Treat Day than any other Dairy Queen in the country. How does a town that small sell around 40,000 blizzards in a single day? On top of that, an unusual number of residents had eerily similar left leg disabilities. I don't know what's going on, but I am just glad I got out before whatever it is fully pulled me in. Story 3. I'm convinced iHeartRadio times commercials across stations so you can't escape ads by switching channels. They're basically a monopoly where I live, and every time I try to change stations during a commercial break, it's ads everywhere. That said, there's actually no conspiracy needed. Radio stations, including competitors, intentionally synchronize ad breaks. If Station A runs commercials at 15, 30, and 45, it's in Station B's interest to do the same so listeners can't flee to uninterrupted music. iHeart, formerly Clear Channel, uses standardized programming templates, so many stations line up naturally. The downside is that radio becomes homogenized. Everything sounds the same because mediocrity is safe and proven. You see the same thing in TV news. Weather, sports, and headlines always land in the same time slots. Story 4. This one's personal. I work as a healthcare consultant, and I genuinely believe insurance companies intentionally deny claims just to extract medical records. I've seen insurers like Humana suddenly reject hundreds of thousands of dollars in hospital claims, not because care was inappropriate, but because they demanded full medical documentation for every case. The hospital was told to either fax massive record dumps or accept zero reimbursement. When insurers are holding the money hostage, providers don't have much leverage. It feels less like policy enforcement and more like coercion. Story 5. The Vela incident is one of my favorites. A couple of years ago, I was analyzing Geiger counter data from a CubeSat project and noticed a radiation spike over a random island. When I looked up the coordinates, they lined up with a suspected Israeli-South African nuclear test site. Later, I learned the sensor I used likely couldn't detect old nuclear radiation reliably. When I mapped the data properly, it seemed more like atmospheric noise. So no, it's not proof, but that spike is how I learned about the Vela incident in the first place, and I still think it's fascinating. I've got the CSV with UV, IR, magnetic, and acceleration data for anyone curious. It was part of an educational satellite test run. Story 6. I think Disney made Zootopia partly to replace the Song of the South characters from Splash Mountain. Splash Mountain was basically the last remaining public-facing connection to Song of the South, a film Disney would rather pretend never existed. Zootopia conveniently introduced a fox and rabbit duo that could replace Brer Fox and Brer Rabbit. Disney also loves retheming rides to modern IP, like replacing Maelstrom with Frozen, so transitioning Splash Mountain to a Zootopia theme made perfect sense. Keep the ride structure, lose the problematic source material, and attach a profitable franchise. Story 7. Banks and landowners absolutely manipulate urban land prices. By marking neighborhoods as high risk, banks deny loans, trapping residents who can't sell or refinance. Property values collapse. Then developers swoop in, buy land cheap, and redevelop it into revitalized high-value real estate. This isn't speculation. It's rooted in redlining policies that followed the Great Depression. White neighborhoods were marked low risk. Black and urban areas were marked red. Loans disappeared. Entire communities were destroyed. Places like Cabrini Green, Overtown, and Liberty City were shaped directly by this system. Story 8. When Ted Kaczynski was at Harvard, he participated in brutal psychological experiments run by Henry Murray. These experiments lasted years and involved extreme psychological stress. Many believe they were connected to the CIA's MK Ultra project. Documentation was later destroyed, but it's hard to ignore the timing. Kaczynski entered as a gifted teenager and left profoundly disturbed. Whether it caused his actions is debatable, but it clearly didn't help. Story 9. I once complained online about a pizza place canceling my order without telling me. The very next order arrived half raw, uncut, and missing the ranch I always get. When I called, the manager sounded like he already knew what the issue was and couldn't care less. My conspiracy? They retaliated because I complained directly to corporate. I got a free pizza credit, but never ordered from them again. Not worth it. Story 10. I fully believe the mattress store conspiracy. I searched mattress stores near me and found 4 mattress stores in the same shopping center. Another road nearby had 5 stores within a mile. That said, Freakonomics actually explains this pretty well. Mattress stores cluster because customers don't want to drive all over town. If one store draws traffic, competitors move in nearby to siphon it off. Eventually, the area becomes the place to shop for mattresses. It looks suspicious, but it's just an aggressive retail strategy. Story 11. All my devices listen in on me. The other day, I was arguing with my dad about some chicken I thought had gone off. It was frozen for about a month, so we weren't too sure. But my dad was insistent that it was still edible. Dad decided to ask Google, and lo and behold, the related searches, even from the first letter, were, is chicken edible after being frozen for a month? And how long can you freeze chicken before it goes off? Also, my mom and I use this tactic where if we need to ring up a company about something and it puts us in a queue, we swear at it. It then puts you on a priority list and you don't have to wait as long. Kinda sketchy on the company's behalf. Story 12. OJ Simpson didn't do it. It was Jason Simpson. OJ didn't do it. Nicole Brown was nearly decapitated and Ron Goldman was stabbed 20 plus times and had numerous defensive wounds. The prosecution claimed the injuries were consistent with 2 knives being used and produced a stiletto knife, good for stabbing but not cutting, and a Swiss Army knife, not really good for hurting anyone other than yourself. OJ had only a small cut on his hand with no other evidence of having been in a fight. The only blood found in his home were a few drops of his own blood, which were contaminated with a preservative used in blood draws. Jason did it. Means, Jason was employed as a sous chef and had his own knife set, and also owned a double-edged combat knife. Motive, Jason was cooking alone at his restaurant that night, and had specifically invited Nicole to come see him cook. She stood him up and went to Mezzaluna where Ron Goldman worked. Jason was known to be bothered by Nicole seeing men other than his father. Opportunity. Jason's time card that night was handwritten for a time much later than when the restaurant shut down. His alibi changed multiple times, but the last time anyone can definitely account for him is around 9:30 that night. The kicker? The day after the murders, OJ retained one of LA's top criminal defense attorneys for Jason, and did not hire his own defense attorney until several days later. Story 13. Most anti-smoking or vaping ads, including those truth ads, are funded by tobacco companies. That part isn't conspiracy, it's just a fact. Sometime in the 80s, the industry was sued, and part of the settlement included them funding anti-smoking ads. It may technically be opinion, but I don't think many are going to disagree that most of those ads are also just plain annoying as hell. I think that's on purpose, so you'll ignore them. Hell, I personally have almost wanted to smoke just to spite the dumbass ads. Story 14. I believe that modern or minimalistic art exists solely for money laundering. It's just a way for rich people to move money around. There's a reason why paintings of plain geometric shapes sell for millions of dollars, and it's not because the buyers are really into shapes. Story 15. All my devices listen in on me. The other day, I was arguing with my dad about some chicken I thought had gone off. It was frozen for about a month, so we weren't too sure, but my dad was insistent that it was still edible. Dad decided to ask Google, and lo and behold, the related searches even from the first letter were, is chicken edible after being frozen for a month? And how long can you freeze chicken before it goes off? Also, my mom and I use this tactic where if we need to ring up a company about something and it puts us in a queue, we swear at it. It then puts you on a priority list and you don't have to wait as long. Kinda sketchy on the company's behalf. Story 16. 3 years ago, I was given a recording of my arrest, which had the dialogue altered to portray the officer's actions in a more positive light. I then spent a long time gathering evidence, analyzing clues, and reconstructing exactly what had happened. I then compiled my findings into a video and posted it on Reddit. People said the video was too long. I then lost hope and gave up the will to keep fighting. Story 17. All the UFO sightings throughout history are just humans from the future, on a time-traveling safari meant to observe how we were in the past. They are supposed to keep out of sight, but thanks to human or mechanical errors, there have been hiccups with their cloaking which have resulted in being seen. That's why there have always been so many reports of them throughout history, but there has never been an attack. It's just us. Also the reason why we don't see many examples of UFOs now, even though pretty much everyone has a camera, is because people are not that interested in this time period, since we already document aspects of human life all the time. Story 18. Gas station owners are the ones putting the card scammers on the pumps. They don't want your info, they want you to distrust paying at the pump so you'll come inside and make an impulse buy. Most stations barely make any money from gas. The money is in the stuff they sell inside. Gas station owner here. I often find card skimmers in the pumps, and I promise you I'm not putting them there. We have expensive custom locks that the mostly Eastern European thieves break into in the middle of the night, hijack the wiring in the pump, and install card readers and decoders. The newer kind can be hidden so far in the wiring harness they are hard to detect and invisible from the outside. These are cartels of criminals that are sophisticated. Most of the good skimmers are Bluetooth, so they just drive past the station and collect the info on their phone. Then they sell spreadsheets of numbers on the black market for thousands that people use for online shopping. Make no mistake, it is an epidemic. Always use a credit card. That way you can protect yourself with disputes or chargebacks. Never use a debit card. Story 19. Well, I used to think my friend's sister married an idiot because he made her live off the grid and made me put my cell phone in a box near his mailbox when I came to visit. They didn't have email either because the government would know what they were searching for. Then Snowden did his thing and I was like, bastards. I am mostly just mad that the government messed up so badly and the agencies were so full of hubris they shut down any congressional oversight. Watch the Frontline docu about it. So I'm sure there will be something else in my lifetime that will confirm some crackpot theory. I mean, they can spin them out of absolutely nothing, so there's a plethora. It only makes statistical sense that they are right once in a while. I just really hope they ain't right about the fluoride thing. Story 20. That we are being listened to through our devices. I think most people already think this, but when you experience it firsthand, it's a pretty chilling experience. Some people might think it's coincidental, but in my experience, it happened about twice. Once I was discussing a career in the military with a friend, and then I got an email from a recruiter a few days later. The next I was talking about occupational therapy with someone, and YouTube started showing ads for occupational therapy schools. I don't remember looking up anything about OT on Google or on my browser. It's happened to me several times as well. Once I went to ask Siri a question, and I hadn't held the button down to ask her yet. I was talking to my friend saying what I was going to ask. Then, about halfway through telling her, I went to hold down the button to ask, and the first half of my sentence was already there. We both just sat and stared at each other for a minute in disbelief. Also, the only ads I get are for things that I've been recently talking about. Things I haven't even looked up yet. It's happened so often to me, I just thought everyone knew this to be true. I had no idea this was a conspiracy theory. Story 21. All this complaining about millennials being lazy and entitled is designed to push more young people to prove they aren't by adopting unhealthy work habits, such as working overtime without complaint, not taking vacation time, etc. I think this became especially necessary after millennials got more burnt out and resentful as unpaid internships became a huge thing. It seems like that helped more people see the light on being exploited and manipulated by workplaces. More and more, people are being screwed over by their employers while being told that they should basically be grateful that people are willing to pay them. Employers aren't cutting you a paycheck because they care about you. You fulfill their needs. They aren't your family, and if it's a 40-hour work week, you don't owe them a minute more than 40 hours. And that's not laziness. That's refusing to be taken advantage of. Story 22. That Stanley Meyer, the inventor of water-powered car, was destroyed by NATO. I can't necessarily claim that his invention worked, as I do not have the expertise to judge his invention, but the circumstances involving his death, with witnesses and his brother saying the same thing, got me pretty convinced. But what really sealed the deal was this video. It shows his official death certificate, where it is stated that he was indeed dining with NATO and yelled that he had been poisoned right before he died. The guy filming the video also says that he had called the coroner who made that report and asked him some questions about it, but the doctor got straight up angry and hung up on him during the questioning. Story 23. I think a reason we haven't been visited by extraterrestrials is because they don't possess the same motivations as us. We as humans want to explore. We want to expand and grow. Aliens from other planets may have no reason to do that. They might be totally cool with being fully sentient, but have no wish to map out their planet or build. They could be as intelligent as us, or even more so, but just not have that drive to seek out other life like we do. Maybe they even know we're just here with their advanced technology and just don't care. Sometimes when I run, I see an impressive ant hill. Large and tall, I think, that's cool, and go on my way. I will never stop and chat with the ants or try to enlighten their society, simply because regardless of how much technology or knowledge I possess, they will never stop being just ants. I always thought of Earth as that ant hill. Story 24. All of these people are offended by this thing. Posts you see are completely made up, fabricated, or exaggerated. Some stupid clickbait site sees a single nut job on Twitter saying, "Hey, I think the song Baby It's Cold Outside sounds kinda harmful," and then makes it sound like the majority of millennials are offended by something that no one actually cares about. I see people constantly talking about how we're all too offended by everything these days, but I almost never see anyone actually claiming to be offended by anything. If anything, it's just the contrarians who will defend any stupid idea for the sake of being contrary to the norm. No one actually cares. Story 25. That Google is listening to you passively at all times and advertising to you based on it. They claim they don't, and they just anticipate based on your habits. But one time, I switched to the ethnic channel to see how long it would take my GF to notice there was a Bollywood drama on in the background, and shortly after we both had advertisements for traditional Indian clothing and flight discounts to India and long-distance calling packages to India. I am not Indian. Nothing in my history would have given Google any indication that I was, other than leaving a Bollywood drama on in the background for 30 minutes. Story 26. Doping in football or soccer. I am 100% convinced that there's a grand conspiracy that involves top federations, leagues, and even anti-doping agencies themselves. Football is the sport with the most money in it in the world, the most at stake, with players doing every conceivable scummy thing on the pitch to gain an advantage, and the most players. Yet virtually no top-level professional footballer has ever been caught doping. A sport where fair play is an antiquated term, but no one ever steps over the line with doping. And it's the cleanest sport in the world? Sure. There's also Operation Puerto that smells really bad when it comes to this. Operation Puerto was a major anti-doping operation that scandalized cycling. Dr. Fuentes' laboratory was raided and over 200 blood bags were confiscated. 70 of them belonged to cyclists. During the trial, several witnesses were called, former clients of Fuentes, etc. They all confirmed that they had seen multiple stars from other sports when visiting his office for their fix. Tennis players and footballers, most prominently. Fuentes himself offers the prosecution to decode his entire client list and give them all the dopers. The prosecution refuses. Then the court orders the destruction of the 130 other blood bags. Fuentes also infamously said that if I talked, we, Spain, would no longer be European and world champions. Spain won Euro 2008 and the 2010 World Cup. There's also the investigations by McLaren, who released the McLaren report that banned Russia from the Olympics in athletics into doping by the Russian Football Federation. FIFA actively worked against him and refused to let him investigate when he requested to do so. Then, during the World Cup, Russia, who was in shambles before the World Cup, became the second sensation of the tournament, beating teams supposedly much stronger than them. Story 27, Terry Nichols and Timothy McVeigh weren't the only ones who orchestrated the Oklahoma City bombing. There was a third person who was with them. I believe this because of the otherwise little-known footnote of Kenneth Trentadue, who was held in a prison cell and was found the next morning after having allegedly taken his life. His brother, Jesse Trentadue, has managed to dig up information that suggested that the FBI at that time were looking for a third person who was also involved in the OKC bombing. Apparently Kenneth, his brother, fit the description of the person they were looking for, and so was arrested on suspicion of being the third person. I believe that the FBI attempted to interrogate him, but something went wrong in their interrogation and he was dead. Rather than admitting that they got the wrong guy, the FBI decided that it would be easier to just conclude that there was no third guy at all, and say that just Terry Nichols and Timothy McVeigh committed the bombing. Story 28. Helen Keller's story is extremely exaggerated. Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that she and her family had found ways to communicate before Anne Sullivan came along, so it wasn't like she was completely incapable of communication prior to learning traditional sign language. But he'd also say her story post-water is under-exaggerated, at least in most media portrayals of her life. The focus is usually on her learning to communicate and going to college, which is fine. But the true noteworthy things are the ones that don't get attention. She co-founded the ACLU, fought for workers' rights, including being on the front lines of protests and picket lines, was an advocate for equal treatment of other races at a time when most white women weren't, was a suffragist and birth control advocate, and obviously worked tirelessly to ensure that disabled people were treated fairly. She was actually a target of FBI surveillance for most of her life due to her radical ideas. Story 29, that the US intentionally sunk the USS Maine so they could declare war on the Spanish, who were in possession of Cuba in the past. The Spanish had absolutely no issues with the Brits and did actively try to avoid them, hence why they had, if I'm not wrong, not a single colony in Africa. But somehow a USS warship sinks pretty near Cuba at the same time the US declared intention to take Cuba as theirs, and boom, war happens over the territory. To clarify, the part about this conspiracy is that the US sunk the USS. Maybe they sabotaged it or something. The part where they blame Spain for it and went to war is true, but the blame over the Maine sinking is the piece where conspirators come together. Story 30. I hope this doesn't get buried and I hope nobody has said anything related, but I have a theory that phone manufacturers are colluding with service providers to make the Wi-Fi receptors on phones intentionally crappy. I will be sitting in spots for hours legitimately right near the router, and see that my Wi-Fi goes in and out and the LTE takes over so that my data starts being eaten into. The service providers stand to gain from people being forced into purchasing increased data plans or paying for overages. Story 31. If the Big Bang Theory is true and the universe all began at one time, isn't it possible that life on other planets began at approximately the same time, or even later, than ours? Maybe the reason there hasn't been a confirmed extraterrestrial visit is because alien life forms are at approximately the same technological level as ours and don't have the ability. They could have even advanced at a slower rate and are still living in the human equivalent to the Stone Age. Maybe we're the most advanced race in the known universe and will soon be abducting and probing alien life forms. You gotta admit, if there's any species that would have no problem abducting a less intelligent life form and putting stuff up its butt, it's humans. Story 32. I live in Malta, and ancient temples and olden civilizations are commonplace considering the island's rich heritage. However, I came across this particular story about the Saflieni Hippopotam that really left me wondering and almost truly believing it's a product of a cover-up. The first article is about an entire class of children, including their teachers on a field trip, reportedly vanishing without a trace inside the catacombs. This story is commonplace between Maltese locals and remains a total mystery to this day. The second article is about a reporter investigating the site following the previous incident and encountering something absolutely. The second article is more of a must-read for any conspiracy theory enthusiast. Both articles are pretty vanilla, but it's an interesting read. I've always wondered how stories like these get buried in the media throughout the years, and hardly anyone bats an eye about them anymore. The authorities supposedly searched for the class of children inside the underground temple for a while, but found no trace of them. How does something like that get thrown under the rug? Story 33. Big grocer owns media companies and the Weather Channel. Every damn year of my 23-year life, every single winter. It's like every 2 weeks, guys, there's gonna be a huge snowstorm, so make sure you go to the store and pick up some food, especially non-perishable food, just in case. And nearly every damn time, without fail, that 12-15 in snowstorm becomes a 3-inch dusting the night before. Tee-hee-hee. The warm air from the Gulf miraculously came up to Ohio out of nowhere for the 1000th time, so the snowstorm won't be bad. I am on to Kroger, Meijer, Walmart, and especially Aldi. No one would expect Aldi. They get the news and Weather Channel to make it sound like a horrid storm, to sell food at a quicker rate, and then conveniently say the night before that the model shifted and we're not going to get hit. Story 34. Various governments are responsible for the creation or releasing and distribution of certain illegal and dangerous drugs, such as Grey Death heroin, spice, K2, crocodile, and the worthless population that uses these drugs redistribute the taxpayer dollars, those frequenting hospitals, rehabs, mental health, jails or prisons, collecting unemployment and using low-cost housing, blame everything on the people doing the drugs, not the people behind the curtain pulling the strings. As a nurse, I see the synthetic creations that are becoming more and more popular, and I have a hard time believing Billy, who didn't finish 8th, just threw some crap in a bucket one day, created something cheap or free to test. They craved after one use, but usually ended them by the 3rd try. It continued to be talked about in the drug community and how dangerous it was, but everyone wanted to try, and they did, and they suffered. I have seen patient after patient tell me how dangerous these drugs are becoming, but they know a guy that says it's the best and most pure, and they will give them a free sample. I usually don't see them again, but in the paper obituary, I have seen a big college freshman quarterback go from a healthy star athlete having a good time at a party to a person with the mental capacity of a 4-year-old. This large man put his mother in the hospital for a long time because she tried to tell him he couldn't have a cookie before dinner. He wanted that cookie and he did what he wanted to get it. Story 35. It's not exactly a conspiracy theory because we know some of it for certain, but I believe the reason older generations had higher rates of domestic and interpersonal violence and so often equated masculinity with violence was due in part to exposure to lead and fuel. which then got into the air, especially for those who worked in industrial jobs and with heavy machinery. Lead poisoning can also lead to depression, which is then self-medicated with alcohol, which makes the lead toxicity symptoms worse. Since lead was removed from gasoline, there's much less lead in the air and most people have much less exposure, and that's part of why violent crime rates are in more or less consistent decline. Story 36. I believe that human civilization may have gotten as advanced as we are now in the distant past. First, anatomically modern humans have been around for like 300,000 years. Civilization, from the earliest settlement we know of to today, is maybe 20,000 years old. In short, there's absolutely plenty of time to go from Sumerians to Americans nearly 10 times over in the time span between the first modern humans and Sumerians. And given that there's nothing unusual about the humans who built Sumer. Second, there are lots of legends about human civilization being destroyed by angry gods, usually because of humans behaving badly. The Greeks had a story like that. The Bible, the Hopi, the Zarathustrians. Just about any place where there's a record, you can find history of and often prophecies of a catastrophe that ends civilization, and more often than not, caused by human hubris. Third, there are all kinds of anomalies in history. Egypt has model airplanes, Indian scripture has Vimanas that sound a lot like airplanes or spacecraft. There's the Pi race map that shows Antarctica before it had been discovered, and it's accurate. These things don't make sense unless you have people understanding technology near our own level before us. Story 37. The Roswell incident was actually a high-altitude balloon carrying Japanese researchers who had discovered the jet stream, but weren't fully aware of the consequences of extremely high altitude, so they suffocated, their eyes bulged out of their heads, and their balloon eventually crashed in Roswell. This explains the smaller-framed humanoid beings with large eyes, strange writing on the destroyed craft, and other nuances about the case. The government covered it up because they didn't want the public worrying that the Japanese, so shortly after World War II, had possibly found a way to send things deep into US territory, possibly bombs or invasion of people undetected. We do know the Japanese had been experimenting with sending bombs over using balloons in the jet stream as well. So I just figure, what's more likely? Aliens or the above theory? Story 38. Donald Glover's performance is gonna suck in The Lion King, 2019. Don't get me wrong, I love Donald Glover. He is an extremely talented actor and singer. But I don't think they cast him because he was the right fit for Simba's model. I think they cast him for name recognition. It is very suspicious that we've had 2 trailers at this point, and we have yet to hear him speak. I think they may be trying to hide his performance. This evidence is not objective in the slightest, but I want you to go to the trailers and look at adult Simba, then listen to Donald Glover in any of his previous roles, or even in just an interview. His voice simply does not look like it will fit well with the realistic CGI lion model they have chosen. Story 39. I think the governments and agencies behind them mass gaslight people with the diagnosis of schizophrenia and other psychotic models. I believe the few people who are closest to knowing the truth about the world, the underlying mechanisms behind not only the power structures of the world, but also the personal day-to-day cause and effect that could really empower others, appear so similar to those with schizophrenia that these people are seen as crazy and discredited. Please, next time you see a crazy person shouting on the street, for example, just listen to what they have to say without judging it. You don't have to accept it. Just listen and don't write them off as crazy because they are unconventional. Here is one to start with. This guy has schizotypal personality disorder. Start the video at 2 minutes for the list of reasons as to why he is not crazy. I am not crazy. Psychiatrist R.D. Laing also had an interesting quote. He said, "If the human race survives, future men will, I suspect, look back on our enlightened epoch as a veritable age of darkness. They will presumably be able to savor the irony of the situation, with more amusement than we can extract from it. The laughs on us. They will see that what we call schizophrenia was one of the forms in which, often through quite ordinary people, the light began to break through the cracks in our all too closed minds." Story 40. This is the only one I'm 100% sure is true. In the 1950s, two American B-52 bombers were transporting, deactivated or something, atomic bombs over Spain, my home country. One of them accidentally dropped one of the bombs near on a shore of a lake near a village, although it did not explode, as it was deactivated or whatever. The bomb was retrieved, but countless people had already come into contact with it. There is photo evidence to prove it, and the lake was contaminated. Both the Spanish and US governments claim the area was decontaminated, but there is countless evidence to prove this is false. Many people have died of cancer in that area, and for an unspecified reason, nobody is allowed to swim in the lake now. Story 41. I do not believe Hitler died in his bunker. He may have escaped, but I don't know. The DNA testing done on his remains by the Soviets several years after the war proved to not be his. The Allies and Soviets could have played off his death to signal the end of the war in Europe. An international manhunt for Hitler following the occupation of Germany would not have put people at immediate closure, especially given how devastating the war was. Story 42. I believe the US military went to Afghanistan in order to seize control of the poppy fields, and instead of destroying them, they manufactured black tar and other forms of heroin and sent it back to the States. I have several friends that were Marines in Afghanistan, and they've confirmed these suspicions. The drugs got worse after being in Afghanistan, not better or more contained. The US military is the biggest cartel in the world. Story 43. That there are missing pages is the history of mankind. I believe civilization is far older than Mesopotamia, 3500 BC, but has been knocked back into the Stone Age in the Younger Dryas climate catastrophe 12,600 years ago, where a meteorite hit the giant ice cap from the last ice age which reached parts of the United States. This ended off most of the giant mammals like saber-toothed tigers, giant sloths, most of the mammoths. Over the past 10 years, a lot of evidence has been uncovered to support this, like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey being from 10,000 BC, and an impact crater in Greenland from 12,000 years ago with a diameter of 34 kilometers. We've also found unexplainable genetic links between humans from the Amazon and Aboriginals from Australia, and only in the Amazon. This is important because this link is not found in North America, and thus excluding migration of these genetic strains through the Beringer Strait. This could mean that our estimates of the first humans reaching the Americas, a little over 10,000 years ago, could be way off, as ancient humans might have been able to cross the oceans. How else could people have reached places like Easter Island, where the closest mainland is 3,500 kilometers away? I do, however, not think this is a deliberate conspiracy, but more a case of sticking with what we've accepted. Graham Hancock has some nice books and lectures, and Jimmy from the YouTube channel, Bright Insight, talks a lot about these theories. Story 44. Titanic was sunk to end the most powerful men against establishing the Federal Reserve. J.P. Morgan, who funded it and invited them, was supposed to go, but got sick and stayed home. The opposition were on the boat and died. Shortly after, the Federal Reserve was quickly established, and it is still screwing over Americans as we speak. The only president that tried to get rid of it was JFK, and he was shot in the head for everybody to see. Let me issue and control a nation's money, and I care not who controls the laws. Mayor Amschel Rothschild. Rothschild still own all the banks along with the other elites, and they control us with the media and our own government. They want us to never get married, not raise families, do drugs, hate each other, go to war, divide and conquer. Story 45. American prisons generate too much money for us to ever take the rehabilitation part of the process seriously. Therefore, we will always have prisons. We have 3 in my town. The population of this town is about 4,000, and the prisons employ about 600 people. Add in the halfway houses and county jail, you are looking at close to 1,000 people that have good paying government jobs. Not to mention all the police officers, judges, probation officers, and criminal lawyers. If we took criminal justice reform seriously, a lot of people would be put off of a job, and our state funding would go way down. Story 46. Some conspiracy theories. think flat earth or anti-vax, were deliberately created to ease the public into accepting internet censorship. For example, if YouTube censors out pro-anti-vax videos, the public is happy to accept that kind of censorship because it's a matter of public health and safety and negatively impacts children. But where do you draw the line? If we set a precedent that it's okay to censor one side of an argument, even if it's a ridiculous argument, there's really no limit to what gets censored in the future. It seems like the anti-vax movement has gained so much traction recently. It's on the news so frequently and talked about everywhere, yet I've never actually encountered an anti-vaxxer in reality, nor do I know anyone that knows an anti-vaxxer. Seems like a made-up problem or an exaggerated problem, so that the public can become outraged, demand that this group be silenced, and welcome internet censorship. Story 47. Switzerland had this incident of a plane crash in 1998, which made Swiss Air go bankrupt. Funny enough, this plane had pretty precious stuff on board, which has never been found, and insurance for it was cashed out. It goes 100 times deeper than I can explain due to complexity and censoring, but believe me, there is a reason the world thinks Switzerland is this small, unimportant country of farmers in the Alps. Research for yourself. Maybe start with the year 1307 when Switzerland was founded. Find connections of crusaders, Vatican, etc. You will be quite surprised. Or research Swiss Bank of BIS, biz for Germans. I lived my entire life in Basel, so I'm not shocked about anything anymore. Story 48. I'd be surprised. There are 7 billion people on this planet, and only a few claim to have seen a UFO, let alone an alien. Not a single video of proof. Nothing. I believe in aliens for sure, but I'm not convinced that it's intelligent or that we have made contact with it. I don't have any answers to prove anything, but you don't either. There have been many civilizations before us, even different species of humans. Who knows what kind of technologies they were able to achieve before their cultures were lost forever. Like I said, I'd be surprised if we have contact with aliens, not that I don't believe it's possible. While I am not claiming UFOs or aliens, strange objects in the sky are a very real phenomenon. In fact, the United States government has declassified that it's had numerous programs studying the phenomenon, and while the vast majority of cases turned out to be hoaxes, misidentification, or even civilians seeing top-secret military craft, there still remains a number of cases that are unsolved. And I don't mean some hillbilly said they saw a flying saucer and nobody can prove or disprove it. I mean objects both detected on radar and physically seen that outmaneuver advanced military aircraft, such as 2 F-18 Hornets near San Diego in 2003. Project Blue Book was a CIA investigation into the UFO phenomenon from the 50s to the 70s. In the United States, Air Force is still actively investigating today with ASAP, Advanced Aerospace Threat Assessment Program. Now let me repeat myself. This does not mean UFOs are aliens. All it means is they're really weird, and no one really knows what they are. Story 49. Okay, hear me out. The Girl Scout organization was built around marketing cookies towards consumers. The entire thing was founded on a groundbreaking advertising concept to have a corporation, the Girl Scout cookie makers, be paid by the very people that then sell their products, giving that parent organization even more money. Boy Scouts attempt to emulate the strategy by selling overpriced popcorn, but there is a niche market exploited by the Girl Scout Corporation of cute little girls showing up to your door selling you cookies. I mean, you can't say no to that. It's impossible. It's like child labor, but even more profitable, because the Girl Scout org doesn't pay their workers, the scouts. In fact, the opposite is true. Through using this strategy, they have stamped themselves as a leader in cookie economics worldwide, and it is all under the pretenses of a simple, innocent outlook. Story 50. Not really a conspiracy, but an economic fact that a lot of people simply do not realize. People are farmed, not physically, but economically. Capitalism works by adjusting prices to the point just below where it becomes too expensive. Products except in the most competitive areas are priced not at what they cost to produce, but at what you, the idiot consumer, are willing to pay for it. Therefore, we are all kept in a state of relative poorness. This ensures those at the top maintain control. Consider this as proof. If we stopped buying things for the sake of it, what would happen to pricing and what would happen to those mega corporations who are farming us?